This is our third TOK video, and today we're going to look at justification and evidence. So, what is justification? So, in a previous video, we looked at the idea that knowledge is a justified true belief. Well, let's break that down. And we need to justify things when we're trying to evaluate a knowledge claim, kind of the base of all knowledge. And so we'd ask ourselves, is this knowledge claim justified? Is this knowledge claim supported by evidence or valid reasoning? Because without certainty, most knowledge is the best that we can do right now. Justification helps us get a little bit closer to that certainty so that we know it a little bit more clearly and we're just a little bit more close to the truth. And so we need to justify things to get a little bit closer. So, in previous videos, we looked at the idea of justified. This is shown to be fair, right, or reasonable. Well, we got to break that down because, like all things, it's going to be a little problematic there. What do we mean by fair? That's a pretty subjective claim there. It often depends on the circumstances and to whom one needs to be fair. And so it just depends on who you're talking to. Fair in different classrooms is going to mean different things. Fair to your brother or sister is going to mean different things. Fair to your parents will mean many different things. And so that's a little bit problematic there. And then reasonable, again, based on reason. Many things can be based on reason, but they are not necessarily true. This cat is in the bag, and based on its reasoning, you can't see the cat. That's the same idea as far as peekaboo. Babies think, oh, can't see me, can't see you. Or another example would be a hot air rises. So if I climb up a mountain, I will be incredibly hot then. And so we've got some issues there that reasoning isn't always going to match up and be a great thing to use for justification. So how can we get there? Justified opinions is one that it has considerable support and reasoned arguments. A justified claim has enough support to convince you that this is true. And so we need a little bit more justification. How do we get there? This comes through multiple facets. It comes through the senses, opinions, memories, intuition, inner convictions, and beliefs. And usually it's a combination of all these things working together. We justify choosing political candidates. Who are you going to vote for? Even if we can't convince our neighbors to do the same, at least we can justify it in our own minds and hearts. Unjustified opinions, this is one that's not based on good reasoning. I'm choosing the political candidate that's the tallest because I think tall people are better leaders. Not a great justification. Justified opinions, you need valid reasons. You need facts. You need logic. You need a little bit more. What's a valid reason? Valid reasons is this is a reason that is well-founded and it's convincing. A valid argument is an argument that follows the rules of logic. It all lines up. People on both sides of an argument can justify their positions. And so sometimes the justification is so convincing that we declare a justified belief to be knowledge. For example, the speed of light in a vacuum is 299,792,458 meters per second. Right? I'm going to trust the scientists on that one because I don't have the skills or the equipment developed to prove this for myself. So I'm going to trust the scientists there. And that fact has just that opinion has become justified, become fact, because so few people have that ability. So we're just going to stick with that. A major step in that justification is evidence to build your argument. And so evidence is simply information that is interpreted to support a particular argument. And again, with all things in argument, it's going to be messy. That's going to be what makes it more fun. And that information can be often interpreted in different ways. It can be used for both sides, and the same facts can be used against each other. Example, Australian Aboriginals traditionally hunt for their food as part of their cultural heritage. And so that's a part of the cultural heritage of Australia. So the question is, should they be allowed to hunt in national parks in Australia? This national parks are part of the national heritage. The traditions of this tribe is a part of the national heritage. So where's the line? Should they be allowed to hunt in the national parks, even if they're about to cause an animal to go extinct? What's going to be more valuable there? Which cultural heritage is going to be more important? Kangaroos or these hunting traditions? Legal evidence is very specific on what is allowed and what is not allowed, such as physical evidence has to be collected in a very distinct way to avoid contamination. And statements made under torture cannot be used. Opinions can only be accepted by expert witnesses. So there's a lot of rules so we can get really clear evidence when it comes to the courtroom. We need proof. Enough evidence to show that this is true or that is false. We need proof. So let's take a look at different types of evidence. First one is anecdotal evidence. This is evidence that comes from personal stories. Well, my neighbor did this, blah, blah, blah. And this is not going to really work, especially in the sciences. So this is not accepted in the sciences. It might work a little bit in history, but even then it's pretty weak. Because it's not direct. And so it's not acceptable in science. It's unreliable. You can't test a story. I know a person who cured their eczema by drinking Sprite. A lot of things could have cured that eczema. It's likely just a coincidence that they were drinking Sprite and something changed. And so we see a little bit of this in this cartoon. The idea that somebody sees it snowing, therefore global warming, not a thing. Or there's this story of a gun owner who shot a criminal, therefore guns make us safer. Or there was an attack that was inspired by ISIS, therefore everybody of the Muslim faith is a terrorist. So these are all anecdotal evidence. They're not really proving, it's just a story, and you can't really investigate very well. So let's look at more investigations when it comes to science, or evidence in science. Major issue here. Neither coincidence nor correlation implies causation. Everybody who went to the moon has eaten chicken. Chicken does not make you go to the moon. So let's take a look at these 3 C's. Coincidence, when 2 or more events happen at the same time, independently of each other. And so it's the idea here, as far as people eating chicken, people going to the moon, that's a coincidence. Just because 2 things happen at the same time doesn't mean they're connected. Correlation, when there is a relationship between 2 or more events, but it's not necessarily a causal relationship. And finally, causation. When one event leads to another event, for example, kicking a football causes the football to move. So all these things don't necessarily connect. It can be a true coincidence. There can be correlation, but that doesn't mean it's caused it. In that somebody had eczema and they drank Sprite and went away, there may be a relationship, but that's not necessarily what caused the shift. I was sick and then drank Sprite and then I got better. That doesn't necessarily mean that I got better because of the Sprite. There's not necessarily a strong correlation. It's likely a coincidence. So using the scientific method allows for the collection of evidence to justify this and to see if, is the Sprite really the cause, or is this just a coincidence? Evidence in history. So historical evidence can include a lot of things. We can use buildings, artifacts, documents, photographs, eyewitness testimonies, so on and so forth. Anything that a human has touched, we can use as evidence to kind of tell the story of that human at that time. It's not all perfect. History is difficult at times because people are going to have different interpretations of the same information, the same evidence. People are going to tell different stories. And so we don't have a singular history. We'll have a history based on, I have this pile of evidence, and this is the story I'm going to use, or I'm going to tell through that evidence. And so it depends on the storyteller. Each historian is going to take that pile of evidence and use it a little bit differently. But it's not all perfect. Some of it is unreliable. Eyewitness statements are going to have bias, resulting in inaccurate descriptions. And so if I have an interview of a man that's 80 years old and I'm asking about something he did when he was 20, he may have forgotten a few things, and bias may have shaped the story over those 60 years. And so that's not going to be the best evidence I'm going to use in my story. I'm going to have to find some other things to fill in the gaps. I may be able to use some of his story, but that's not going to be the star. I'm going to have to use some other things to double check. Roman coins were found in India. Why are they there? Well, we have to figure out, and we have to use reason sometimes, saying, okay, there's coins here. Hey, they shouldn't be there, so what's the connection? And so we'll have to use reason, this plus this equals this, so therefore we're going to use reason to interpret the evidence that India was trading with Rome. The arts. We all have preferences. Arts, again, it's going to be a tricky one. We all have preferences for music, drama, the visual arts. These preferences are often cultural. We enjoy what is familiar, enjoyed by our peers. So that if you are growing up in Oklahoma, you might like country music. If you're growing up in New York City, you might like hip-hop. And so your location's going to influence your cultural values, your cultural norms when it comes to art. The tricky part is, can we deem one artwork superior to another? Is hip-hop better than country? Is Van Gogh better than Da Vinci? Students of IB arts classes, like some of you, you're going to have your work assessed. So there is a way to judge, and it has been judged, and it will be judged. Some of this evidence that your teachers are going to use is going to include a performer's technical skills, an understanding of the techniques necessary, an exploration and development of ideas, your creativity. All these things are going to come together that you will be judged as an art student. And this is largely based on the same way that we've been judging art for millennia. Right, but let's focus on visual art. Art collectors are prepared to pay millions for a work of art, and yet they regard a forgery of the same work as worthless, even if it has fooled the experts for years, and it looks exactly the same. One of these paintings is worth millions. One of these paintings is worth dozens of dollars. So the value cannot be in the aesthetics here, because both the masterpiece and the master forgery may be identical, that these are pretty close paintings. And so this comes down to aesthetics is the philosophy concerned with the nature and appreciation of beauty, and that what we find as pretty, what is beautiful, what do we find visually pleasing? Well, that's not the case here. If they're both visually the same, then it's not about what's visually pleasing. We're not able to put a value on that. What evidence do we have that the Mona Lisa has greater artistic than my picture of a pretty woman? Is that one aesthetically more pleasing? Is that why the Mona Lisa is worth more than my bad pictures? What kind of evidence do we have that the paintings in the museums are actually original? Which one of these is the Mona Lisa? Well, this is where science is going to come in. With the scientists, we can come up with carbon dating. We can take a little chunk and look at the radioactive isotopes and how they have degraded over time. We can look at the chemical analysis of the paints and determine, okay, they were using this style of paint in the year 1500, and the chemistry of the paint matches up there. We can use X-rays and look at the layers of paint that was put on this. We can use the careful study by experts of techniques, that this artist used this type of brush stroke. And we also and then we get the historians coming in and looking at the provenance of our work. These all come together to figure out if an artwork is original. So the scientists and the historians are working together with the artists all together to figure out, is this art the original piece, or is it a forgery? And so provenance, this is the record of ownership. So this is the history of who has owned this piece of art. And again, we're all working together, the scientists, the artists, the historians. What evidence do we have that the Mona Lisa has greater artistic merit than my pretty painting of a woman? That's a little tricky there. And that people are willing to pay millions for the Mona Lisa, nothing for my bad painting. And it's a matter of taste. In the case of Van Gogh died a pauper. He died a poor man, not really able to sell very many of his paintings. The public didn't value his work in his lifetime. After he died, the appreciation started to skyrocket in the 20th century as we started to really appreciate the value of his technique. And so times change, values change, tastes change. And so if we try to value art by money, it's not really going to work out. Spending money on art says more about the whims of the purchaser than it does about the actual art. And that tastes change constantly. All right, and that's our look at evidence and justification.